Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us today. Today, we're really excited to be talking with you all about our recently published brief, Free and Reduced Price Lunch Eligibility by New Hampshire State Legislative District. I'm Sarah Boege. I'm a policy analyst at the Carson School of Public Policy at the University of New Hampshire. And I'm really pleased to be joined today by my colleague and co-author, Jess, who's going to kick things off for us. So Jess, take it away.
Thanks so much, Sarah. And hi, everyone. Thank you again for joining us today, particularly amid the uncertainty of the current climate. We're really pleased for those of you who are able to connect with us today. I am Jess Carson. I'm a research assistant professor at the Carson School of Public Policy at the University of New Hampshire. And like Sarah said, we're excited to be sharing this new research brief with you all today. Of course, when we started the efforts on this brief, the current climate was a bit different. And so we're going to talk a little bit about the driving questions preceding the current public health crisis, but also the implications as they relate to the environment we're in today. Before we kick things off, I really wanted to acknowledge the sponsors of this brief, who are New Hampshire Hunger Solutions, who are a great partner in supporting this brief and getting us rolling with the data. So thanks very much to them. Sarah, maybe a good place to start would be to talk a little bit about what exactly we mean by free and reduced price lunch eligibility before diving into some of the questions that motivated this work today.
Yeah, that's a great idea, Jess. Yeah, it can be a little bit confusing because we talk about free and reduced price lunch eligibility as well as participation, which are two different things. So in order to be eligible to participate in free and reduced price lunch, children must live in families with incomes below 185% of the federal poverty line. And in 2019, to give you a sense, that was approximately $48,000 for a family of four. So an important thing to note here is that just because a student is eligible to participate in free and reduced price lunch, they don't necessarily participate. So there could be a number of reasons why they might not participate, why they might experience barriers to participation. But sort of a strength of looking at the eligibility rates is that we're also able to use this as a proxy for low income rates and nutrition risk kind of more generally at the local level. So the free and reduced price lunch eligibility data is available at the school and school district level. Although school districts are not the most intuitive geography, I think especially in New Hampshire, people think a little bit more in terms of counties and especially towns. So this is a way by bringing it up to the House district level, this is a way to look locally, but with a little bit more intuitive geographies. And of course, geographies that are especially pertinent to local legislators tackling these sorts of issues.
Yeah, I'm glad you said that, Sarah, because I think that, of course, the current policy climate means that these data can be perhaps especially useful now. So those weren't really the policy questions framing the brief at the outset, of course, which we started several months ago. We were really thinking about how to make data that maybe aren't accessible to legislators in a way that's, as you said, intuitive for them, and to sort of translate it into a way that does make sense for them. In the current climate, however, we also think that these data are especially relevant because they provide another resource for legislators who are really thinking about how to best serve the families and children in their districts in a way that is a very non-traditional climate, particularly around school closures and the implications that that has for the ability for districts to deliver meals to students. So having a sense of what eligibility looks like within and across districts, we're hoping is especially helpful at the moment as all of us are sort of playing catch up and doing triage and trying to really understand how to move forward in a very timely and immediate context. Sarah, maybe we should dive in a little bit to what the specific findings are in terms of rates within and across the state.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's a great point to jump to next. So really our main finding was just that there is wide variation in free and reduced price lunch eligibility across the state of New Hampshire. So just to sort of give you a sense of the range of that, the lowest eligibility rate was found in Rockingham District 7 or the Windham area at 2.5%, whereas the highest rate was found in Hillsborough District 12, which is Manchester Ward 5, at 82.6%. So quite a range there from as low as 2.5% all the way up to 82.6%. And then the average across all schools for which the Department of Education reported data was at 24.8%. So the average was that about a quarter of students in a given school are eligible for this program, sort of highlighting once again how important this program could be for New Hampshire students. So thinking about it as not 1 in 10, but up to 1 in 4 students on average being eligible for this program. So we did find some somewhat unsurprising distributions of eligibility rates across the state, following more or less these established patterns of child and family poverty that might look familiar to some people. So some of the highest eligibility rates were found in the north, in Coos and Carroll counties, and some of the lowest rates were found in the southeastern Rockingham and Strafford counties. But we really did find a lot of significant disparities even within those counties. Jess, maybe you have some good examples of that we could dig into a little bit more.
Sure. I think your point about the within place variation is a really important one, because a lot of the data that we have for New Hampshire don't really allow us to dig in as deeply below the county level in many cases, certainly. And so these data do provide one way to sort of think about low income distribution around the state below the county level. And one example of important variation at the sub-county level might be in Hillsborough County. So there's a tremendous amount of variation in free and reduced price lunch eligibility rates there. For instance, 2 of the 5 districts with the lowest free and reduced price lunch rates, eligibility rates, were in Hillsborough, as well as 4 of the 5 districts with the highest free and reduced price lunch eligibility rates. So that just is another illustration of the great spread even within a county in terms of free and reduced price lunch eligibility rates. I think we might want to spend a couple of minutes talking about our very specific policy audience implications. Sarah, do you want to kick us off on one of those or 2 of those?
Yeah. Thanks, Jess. I think that's a great segue. So one of the important things that we thought legislators could really tackle with data like this is sort of looking at bridging this gap between eligibility and participation. So being aware of how many students in their district are eligible for this kind of a program, and then also really coming up with some creative solutions and ways that we can engage students and provide as much access to these programs as possible. So there is a proposed federal rule that might change the current situation, something that legislators should be aware of, and hopefully both at the level of local legislators as well as within schools, there can maybe be some activity and planning around this. So the proposed federal rule would eliminate categorical eligibility, which essentially is something that presently has students who are from families that are already receiving benefit programs such as temporary assistance for needy families, TANF, also known as welfare benefits, or those who are receiving food benefits like the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, SNAP, or food stamps. If their family already is receiving benefits from one of these programs, then they're automatically eligible for free and reduced price lunch. So if this were eliminated, about 96% of these students who are categorically eligible would still be eligible based on the rule of 185% of the federal poverty line. However, they would have to apply for the program for the first time. So these families would be used to just automatically being enrolled and able to participate in this program. And all of a sudden, they would have to know to apply, understand how to apply, and sort of navigate this administrative system that maybe they haven't interacted with as much before, aren't aware of, don't have the supports to really, nimbly navigate.
I think that's really useful to have that federal context. And then, of course, it's hard to talk about anything related to schools at the moment without also acknowledging what the much more short-term implications of this kind of work are. So we're hoping that as legislators are able to access these kinds of numbers, that helps folks be, as you said, nimble in thinking about how to respond to their districts. So legislators are able to see the rates of free and reduced price eligibility in their districts and hopefully feel better prepared to understand the urgency with which students and families in their districts are relying on or possibly benefiting from school-based meals. Now, of course, with school closures, some of the models that we suggest in the brief itself, moving towards sort of not cafeteria based, but sort of grab and go and alternate timing after the bell kind of breakfast or lunches. Those sorts of non-traditional models may become particularly relevant now. Now, of course, they wouldn't be delivered in schools at the moment, but really giving legislators a sense of, okay, I have a high share of students who are eligible in my district. What can I do to ensure that these kids are still being connected with meals in creative ways during school closures? And then over the longer term, maybe thinking about how to partner with their local school stakeholders to really understand, I have high eligibility in my district. What does the enrollment actually look like? School folks will be able to weigh in on that side of the equation and perhaps give legislators some information about, okay, eligibility is high, but we really seem to have a barrier to actually participating. What are some of those barriers? Are there ways that in practice or in policy, we can make it easier for students who are eligible to actually enroll in and take part in and benefit from these kinds of school-based nutrition programs over the long run?
Yeah, that's a great point, Jess. And I think this sort of gets back to one of the pieces that makes these data so useful, which is also the fact that can serve as a bit of a proxy for low-income families in general. So also, in terms of response to the present public health crisis, there may be additional measures that legislators can look into that would help these most vulnerable families. So having a better understanding of the state of their district and the percentage of families who fall into this category can also maybe assist in other kinds of assistance programs besides the, of course, immediate and very important delivery of meals as schools are closed. So hopefully, this will serve as kind of an interesting source for new creative solutions that can come to fruition during this time.
That's great, Sarah. Thanks very much. Before we wrap up for today, I want to make sure that folks know where they can access this brief. Everybody can access the research itself underlying today's talk on our website, along with our catalog of a variety of other publications. You can find those at carsi.unh.edu/publications. And of course, if folks have questions specific to this research or other work we've done, we're always delighted to hear from people.
Great. Well, thank you very much for joining us. We appreciate your attention during this uncertain time, and we hope to hear from you and connect further about this work and other work. So thank you.